Rain hammered the windshield as Marcus Reed guided his aging pickup along a lonely stretch of highway outside Birmingham, Alabama. The storm had arrived without warning, turning the road into a ribbon of black glass. Most travelers had already found shelter. Marcus was simply looking for coffee, a warm meal, and a few quiet minutes before continuing north toward Chicago. At 53, Marcus carried himself with the calm discipline of a man who had survived things most people could not imagine. His dark hair had faded to silver at the temples. A thin scar crossed his forehead, disappearing into his closely trimmed hairline. To strangers, he looked like a retired tradesman or a long-haul driver. That illusion suited him perfectly. He preferred being overlooked. A flickering roadside diner appeared through the rain. The building was old, built from weathered brick and stubborn determination. Inside, the smell of fresh pie mixed with coffee and bacon grease. The warmth wrapped around Marcus the moment he stepped through the door. A waitress named Linda greeted him with a tired smile that suggested years of double shifts and difficult customers. "You picked a rough night to travel," she said while filling a mug with steaming coffee. Marcus smiled politely. "I've seen worse. Coffee and a slice of cherry pie would make it much better." Linda laughed softly. "You're definitely not from around here." "Just passing through," Marcus replied. Her smile faded slightly. She leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Then don't stay too long. Some people around here don't like strangers, especially if they're bored." Marcus understood exactly what she meant. Every town had its gatekeepers. Some wore expensive suits, others carried badges. He thanked her for the warning and settled into a booth near the window. Outside, rainwater flowed through the parking lot like small rivers. Marcus opened a paperback novel but found himself staring beyond the pages. His thoughts drifted toward his daughter in Chicago. They had not seen each other in months. Life had a way of creating distance even between people who loved one another deeply. The bell above the entrance suddenly rang. Conversation inside the diner died almost instantly. Two sheriff's deputies entered, bringing cold air and tension with them. The older deputy, Roy Dalton, moved with the confidence of a man who rarely heard the word no. Beside him walked Tyler Crane, younger and eager, constantly glancing toward his superior for approval. Marcus felt their attention settle on him before either man spoke. Dalton scanned the room and smirked. "Looks like we got ourselves a visitor tonight." Nobody answered. He walked directly toward Marcus's booth. The deputy's boots echoed against the tile floor. Every customer watched quietly, pretending not to. "That your truck outside?" Dalton asked. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied calmly. "Out-of-state plates, late at night, storm rolling through." "That's interesting." Marcus closed his book. "It's just a truck, deputy." Dalton's smile disappeared. For several long seconds, neither man looked away. Linda stood frozen behind the counter. The older customers lowered their eyes. Something unpleasant was approaching, and everyone could feel it. Dalton finally leaned forward. "Mind showing me some identification?" Marcus slowly reached for his wallet. Years of experience had taught him when trouble was coming. The request itself was not the problem. It was the hunger in Dalton's eyes. As Marcus placed his identification on the table, a black government-issued phone vibrated silently inside his jacket pocket. The screen remained hidden, but a single encrypted message appeared. The message contained only 4 words. "Operation Archangel has begun." The message vanished almost immediately, leaving the screen dark once again. Marcus felt a familiar tightening in his chest. Most people would have ignored it. Most people would not have recognized the significance of those 4 words. Operation Archangel. It was not a military exercise. It was not a training mission. The phrase belonged to a classified federal investigation that had quietly expanded across several states during the previous year. Marcus had spent months helping gather intelligence for it. He had expected to receive updates eventually. He had not expected one while sitting inside a roadside diner in rural Alabama. Deputy Roy Dalton watched him carefully. "You seem distracted," Dalton said. Marcus slid his wallet across the table. "Just thinking about the weather." Dalton studied the driver's license. "Marcus Reed, Washington, D.C. address. What brings a man like you through Oak Ridge County?" "Family." "That's all?" "That's enough." The answer irritated Dalton. Some men viewed every conversation as a contest. Dalton was clearly one of them. The deputy tossed the license back onto the table with unnecessary force. "Step outside, guys," he said. The entire diner became silent. Marcus looked up slowly. "Am I being detained?" Dalton's jaw tightened. "I'm asking the questions." Marcus had encountered men like Dalton throughout his life, men who mistook authority for character, men who confused compliance with respect. They often appeared powerful until someone challenged their assumptions. Still, Marcus remained seated. "Deputy," he said calmly, "if I've committed a crime, tell me what it is. If not, I'd like to finish my coffee." Tyler Crane shifted nervously beside his partner. "Maybe we should just run the plates," he suggested. Dalton ignored him. "Stand up." Marcus sighed. Outside, thunder rolled across the Alabama sky. Rain continued striking the windows. The weather seemed to mirror the growing tension inside the diner. Linda stood motionless behind the counter. "Roy," she said quietly, "the man's done nothing wrong." Dalton turned toward her. "Nobody asked you, Linda." The waitress immediately lowered her eyes. Marcus noticed. That brief exchange told him more about the town than any conversation could. Fear had become routine here. People measured every word carefully. They had learned there were consequences for speaking freely. Marcus slowly rose from the booth. At 6 feet 2 inches tall, he suddenly seemed much larger than before. Not physically imposing, simply composed, controlled. The difference mattered. Dalton took a step closer. "What's in the truck?" "Tools, clothes, spare parts." "Mind if we take a look?" "Do you have a warrant?" Dalton smiled. "Do I need one?" Marcus already knew the answer. The deputy had no intention of following procedure. He was looking for submission. The search itself was secondary. Before Marcus could respond, Tyler's radio crackled. A dispatcher's voice filled the room. "Unit 12, respond. Unit 12, respond immediately." Tyler grabbed the radio. "Go ahead." Several seconds of static followed. Then the dispatcher spoke again. This time her voice sounded strained. "Federal task force activity reported entering county jurisdiction. Multiple government vehicles confirmed. Destination unknown. Sheriff requests immediate status update from all deputies." Dalton frowned. "Federal task force?" "That's what dispatch said," Tyler replied. Marcus felt another vibration from his phone. He didn't look at it. He didn't need to. Operation Archangel was moving, and based on the timing, he suspected Oak Ridge County was no longer a random stop along his journey. Dalton folded his arms. "Looks like tonight just got interesting." Marcus looked directly into the deputy's eyes. "I have a feeling it did." Neither man realized that less than 10 miles away, a convoy of unmarked federal SUVs had already crossed the county line. Inside the lead vehicle sat Special Agent Rebecca Collins of the FBI Civil Rights Division. Spread across her lap was a thick investigative file. The name printed on the cover was not Marcus Reed. It was Sheriff Harold Maddox, and the evidence inside was enough to destroy an entire county government. By sunrise, the storm had passed. Heavy clouds drifted across a pale Alabama sky, while Oak Ridge County woke to another ordinary morning. At least that was what most residents believed. Marcus Reed sat alone in a modest motel room several miles outside town. A cup of black coffee rested beside a folder containing notes he had collected over the previous 6 months. Through the window, he watched the first rays of sunlight touch the distant pine trees. His phone rang. The caller ID displayed a secure federal number. "Reed," Marcus answered. "This is Agent Rebecca Collins," a woman said. "I assume you've heard about our arrival." Marcus smiled slightly. "The entire county probably has by now." "Good, then we don't have much time." Her voice carried the controlled urgency of someone balancing multiple crises. "What's the situation?" Marcus asked. "Worse than we expected. We've confirmed evidence of civil rights violations, illegal seizures, witness intimidation, and corruption reaching the county courthouse. The sheriff's department appears to be operating like a private business." Marcus wasn't surprised. And Sheriff Maddox? Still untouchable in the eyes of most locals. That's the problem. The call ended with a simple request. Stay available. Marcus knew what that meant. The investigation was entering its most dangerous phase. Meanwhile, Sheriff Harold Maddox sat inside his office, reviewing reports with growing irritation. The 60-year-old lawman had ruled Oak Ridge County for nearly 2 decades. He enjoyed near-total loyalty from deputies, judges, business owners, and political allies. At least he had until recently. The arrival of federal investigators threatened everything. "What exactly are they looking for?" Maddox demanded. Deputy Roy Dalton stood across the room. "Nobody knows." "Then find out." Dalton nodded. Despite his confidence, he felt nervous. The federal government did not send specialized teams into small counties without a reason, and the timing bothered him, especially after his encounter with Marcus Reed the previous night. Something about the traveler felt wrong. Not criminal. Dangerous. The distinction mattered. Across town, Linda Parker unlocked the diner and prepared for the breakfast rush. The previous evening remained fresh in her memory. She had watched Roy Dalton bully strangers for years. Most people lowered their heads, most people left town. Marcus Reed had done neither. As she poured coffee into fresh pots, a black SUV parked outside. A woman stepped out, professional, confident, federal. Linda knew immediately. Agent Rebecca Collins entered the diner and approached the counter. "Morning," she said. Linda nodded cautiously. "Can I help you?" Collins placed a photograph on the counter. It showed Sheriff Maddox standing beside several deputies. "How long have these men been coming here?" Linda stared at the picture. Her stomach tightened. This was the moment she had feared. The moment someone finally asked questions. Questions that could change everything. "A long time," she answered carefully. "Have you ever witnessed misconduct?" Linda hesitated. Years of fear battled against years of frustration. Outside, customers began arriving. Inside, the diner felt strangely silent. "Miss Parker," Collins said softly, "I know this is difficult." Linda looked toward the window. For years, she had watched people suffer quietly. Tourists targeted, drivers harassed, families intimidated. Nobody ever challenged the system. Nobody except Marcus Reed. Finally, she took a deep breath. "If I tell you what I know," Linda asked, "can you protect my children?" Collins immediately understood. This wasn't just testimony, it was fear. Real fear. The kind that changes how people live. "Yes," Collins answered. Linda nodded slowly. Then she began talking. For nearly 2 hours. By the time she finished, Agent Collins had filled an entire notebook. Illegal traffic stops, cash seizures, threats, destroyed evidence, suspicious arrests, missing complaints. The deeper she went, the darker the story became. When Collins finally left the diner, she immediately called her supervisor. "We have probable cause," she said. "For who?" Collins looked toward the sheriff's office across town. "For almost everyone." At that exact moment, Sheriff Maddox received a confidential text message from an unknown number. The message contained a single photograph. It showed Linda Parker speaking with federal agents. Beneath the image were 6 words. "She's talking. Handle it immediately." Sheriff Harold Maddox stared at the message for nearly 10 seconds. The photograph was unmistakable. Linda Parker sat inside the diner, speaking with Agent Rebecca Collins. A federal vehicle was visible through the window behind them. Someone had been watching. Someone had access to information they should not possess. Maddox deleted the message immediately. Then he called Roy Dalton. "My office, now." 5 minutes later, Dalton entered and closed the door. The sheriff handed him the phone. Dalton's face darkened. "She's talking. Looks that way. Want me to handle it?" Maddox leaned back in his chair. For years, that phrase had solved countless problems. Handle it. Witnesses became quiet. Complaints disappeared. Evidence got misplaced. People learned lessons. But this situation felt different. Federal investigators were already inside the county. One mistake could bring everything crashing down. "No threats," Maddox said carefully. "No direct contact." Dalton looked surprised. "Then what?" "Find out exactly what she told them." Dalton nodded. He understood. Information first, action later. Across town, Marcus Reed parked outside a small automotive repair shop. His truck genuinely needed attention after hundreds of miles on the road. The owner, a gray-haired mechanic named Walter Simmons, recognized him immediately. "You're the fellow from the diner." Marcus smiled. "Guilty," Walter laughed. "Careful saying that around here." The joke landed harder than either man intended. While the mechanic inspected the radiator, Marcus sat beneath a shade tree near the building. He watched traffic pass along the highway. Most vehicles belonged to local residents: pickup trucks, delivery vans, school buses, normal life, the kind worth protecting. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Agent Collins. "We need to meet." "Bad news?" "Potentially." Marcus listened quietly. "Someone inside the county knew about my interview with Linda less than 30 minutes after it happened." Marcus frowned. "Leak? That's what it looks like." "How high?" "Possibly courthouse level." That changed everything. A corrupt deputy was dangerous. A compromised court system was something else entirely. The meeting took place later that afternoon in Birmingham. Inside a secure federal office, maps and investigation files covered an entire conference table. Marcus studied photographs pinned to a board. Sheriff Maddox, Roy Dalton, county commissioners, business owners, a district attorney, several judges. The web extended much farther than anyone expected. "How many complaints?" Marcus asked. Collins opened a folder. "Officially, 14. And unofficially?" She slid another file across the table. 73. Marcus slowly exhaled. Most victims had never filed formal reports. They assumed nobody would listen. Maybe they were right. Until now. "What's our biggest problem?" he asked. Collins pointed to a photograph of Judge Leonard Bishop, the county's senior judge. "Him." Marcus studied the image. The judge appeared respectable: silver hair, expensive suit, friendly smile, exactly the kind of man juries trusted. What did he do? Signed questionable warrants, approved suspicious seizures, dismissed complaints without hearings. Marcus nodded. Corruption rarely survived without institutional protection. Someone always opened doors. Someone always looked away. Late that evening, Judge Bishop sat alone inside his large home overlooking the outskirts of town. He poured himself a drink and reviewed financial statements. The federal investigation worried him, not because he feared prison, because he feared exposure. For years, he had convinced himself he was helping maintain order. The money had simply become part of the arrangement, a reward, a benefit, a convenience. At least that was what he told himself. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Judge Bishop speaking." The voice on the other end was calm, too calm. "Good evening, Judge." "Who is this?" "Someone who knows about the lake house in Florida." Bishop's blood ran cold. The caller continued. "The property purchased through a trust, the trust funded through accounts connected to county forfeiture funds." Silence. "Who are you?" Bishop whispered. The wrong question. The voice paused. The right question is whether federal investigators already know. The call ended. Judge Bishop remained frozen in his chair. For the first time in 20 years, he felt genuine fear. Meanwhile, miles away in a secure hotel room, Marcus received a classified briefing from Washington. He expected updates on the investigation. Instead, the report contained something entirely different. A photograph. An old photograph. The image showed Marcus standing beside a younger man during a military deployment nearly 25 years earlier. The caption underneath made his stomach drop. Former Sergeant Daniel Cross identified in Oak Ridge County. Status: active person of interest. Marcus stared at the picture. Daniel Cross was not just an old acquaintance. He was the one man Marcus believed had died overseas decades ago. And according to the report, someone had just seen him walking through Oak Ridge County 2 days earlier. Marcus did not sleep that night. The photograph remained open on his laptop screen long after midnight. Rain tapped softly against the hotel window, while Birmingham's distant city lights shimmered through the darkness. Daniel Cross. The name alone carried decades of memories. 24 years earlier, they had served together during a dangerous overseas deployment. Daniel had been brilliant, fearless, and fiercely loyal. He had also disappeared during an operation that ended in chaos. Official records listed him as killed in action. Marcus had attended the memorial service. He had spoken with Daniel's parents. He had stood beside an empty coffin. Now federal intelligence claimed Daniel was alive and somehow connected to Oak Ridge County. Nothing about that made sense. The next morning, Agent Rebecca Collins arrived carrying fresh files. She immediately noticed Marcus's expression. You look like you haven't slept. I haven't. He turned the laptop toward her. Collins studied the photograph. Who's Daniel Cross? Marcus remained silent for several seconds. A ghost. She raised an eyebrow. I need more than that. Marcus explained everything: the deployment, the mission, the disappearance, the official death report. By the time he finished, Collins looked deeply concerned. If he's alive, why stay hidden for 24 years? That's exactly what worries me, Marcus replied. Across Oak Ridge County, Sheriff Maddox faced problems of his own. News of the federal investigation had begun spreading. Residents whispered in diners. Business owners exchanged rumors. People who had remained silent for years suddenly felt hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope made people talk. Inside the sheriff's office, Maddox gathered his most trusted allies. The atmosphere was tense. No jokes, no confidence, only fear. Somebody is feeding information to Washington, Maddox said. Find out who. Roy Dalton leaned forward. What if it isn't someone local? The room became quiet. What do you mean? Maddox asked. Dalton hesitated. For the first time, he sounded uncertain. That guy from the diner, Marcus Reed, something isn't right about him. Several deputies exchanged glances. Maddox frowned. You think he's connected? I think he showed up at the exact moment our problem started. The sheriff considered that possibility. Coincidences happened, but experienced lawmen learned not to trust them. Meanwhile, Agent Collins received an unexpected call. The source was confidential. The information was explosive. Within an hour, she and Marcus were driving toward a remote property outside Oak Ridge County. The land belonged to an abandoned logging company. Officially, the site had been closed for years. Unofficially, strange activity continued there. Federal surveillance had documented vehicles arriving late at night. No records existed explaining why. The property sat deep among dense pine forests. A rusted gate blocked the entrance. Weathered buildings stood beyond it like forgotten relics. Marcus studied the area through binoculars. Someone's using it. Collins nodded. Fresh tire tracks cut through the mud. Generators hummed somewhere inside. The place was far from abandoned. As they observed from a distance, a black SUV emerged from one of the structures. Marcus focused his binoculars. The driver remained partially hidden. Then the man turned slightly. Marcus froze. Every muscle in his body tightened. What is it? Collins asked. Marcus lowered the binoculars. For the first time since arriving in Alabama, genuine shock appeared on his face. It's him. Daniel? Marcus nodded slowly. The years had aged him. His hair was gray, his face carried deep lines, but there was no mistake. The man driving the SUV was Daniel Cross, alive, very much alive. The vehicle disappeared down a dirt road. Neither Marcus nor Collins spoke for several moments. Finally, Collins broke the silence. You said he was declared dead. He was. Then why is he here? Marcus stared toward the distant trees. A terrible possibility had begun forming in his mind, one he desperately hoped was wrong. Because if Daniel Cross had been living in secret all these years, there were only two explanations. Either he had spent decades hiding from powerful enemies, or he had become one. Back in Washington, analysts reviewed newly recovered financial records from Oak Ridge County. Most appeared routine, until one account drew attention. The account belonged to a shell corporation registered in Delaware. The company had quietly received millions of dollars over 12 years. And its authorized signatory was not Sheriff Maddox, not Roy Dalton, not Judge Bishop. The signature belonged to Daniel Cross. At that exact moment, hundreds of miles away, Daniel stood inside the abandoned logging facility, staring at a wall covered with photographs. One photograph showed Marcus Reed. A red circle had been drawn around his face. Daniel studied it quietly, then he spoke to someone standing in the shadows. He's getting closer than expected. The unseen figure answered. Should we stop him? Daniel's expression hardened. No. He looked once more at Marcus's photograph. Not yet. Marcus Reed could not stop thinking about Daniel Cross. The image of his former teammate driving away from the abandoned logging facility replayed endlessly in his mind. Questions multiplied faster than answers. For nearly a quarter century, Daniel had officially been dead. Yet he was alive, wealthy, and somehow connected to a corruption network stretching across Alabama. Nothing about the situation felt accidental. Late that afternoon, Marcus and Agent Rebecca Collins established surveillance on the facility from a wooded ridge overlooking the property. The summer heat pressed heavily against the landscape. Cicadas screamed from the trees while distant thunderheads gathered on the horizon. "We've identified at least 12 people entering and leaving," Collins said, reviewing photographs. "Employees? Maybe security, maybe something else." Marcus studied the images. Several faces matched names connected to shell companies and suspicious county contracts. Others remained unidentified. Then he stopped at one photograph. A woman exiting the building, mid-40s, professional appearance, expensive clothing. Marcus recognized her immediately. "That's District Attorney Ellen Pierce." Collins looked surprised. "You're sure?" "Positive." The discovery deepened the mystery. Why would a district attorney secretly visit an abandoned industrial site connected to a supposedly dead man? The answer could not be innocent. Across Oak Ridge County, panic was beginning to spread among members of the old network. Judge Bishop had barely slept. Sheriff Maddox was drinking more heavily than usual. Several business owners had quietly contacted attorneys. People who once felt untouchable suddenly sensed the ground shifting beneath them. Fear had changed sides. For years, ordinary citizens feared powerful officials. Now, powerful officials feared accountability. That evening, a federal warrant authorized deeper financial analysis. The results stunned everyone. Millions of dollars had moved through a web of companies over the previous decade. County funds, property seizures, construction contracts, campaign donations, everything eventually flowed toward a central organization hidden behind layers of legal paperwork. And every trail pointed back to Daniel Cross. "He's not just involved," Collins said, "he's running it." Marcus remained silent. The conclusion felt impossible. Daniel had once risked his life protecting others. He had saved civilians, saved soldiers, saved Marcus himself. Yet the evidence kept growing. That night, Marcus received an encrypted message. Unknown sender, no traceable origin, only a location and a time. Midnight, old railroad bridge, come alone. Marcus stared at the screen. Collins immediately objected when he showed her. "Absolutely not. It could be important. It could be a trap. Probably is. Then we're not doing it." Marcus looked toward the darkening sky. Sometimes answers required risks, and Daniel Cross represented the biggest unanswered question in the entire investigation. Shortly before midnight, Marcus arrived at the abandoned railroad bridge. The structure stretched across a narrow river outside town. Moonlight reflected off the water below. The surrounding woods stood silent. Too silent. Marcus immediately noticed. Someone was watching. Years of experience made the sensation unmistakable. He waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, a figure emerged from the darkness, tall, gray-haired, confident. Daniel Cross. For several seconds, neither man spoke. The years separating them seemed to vanish. Old memories collided with present reality. Marcus broke the silence first. "You should be dead." Daniel smiled sadly. "That's what everyone believes." "Why?" "Because it kept people alive." Marcus frowned. "What people?" Daniel stepped closer. Moonlight illuminated his face. The resemblance to the man Marcus remembered remained unmistakable. Older, harder, but still Daniel. "You think this investigation is about a corrupt sheriff," Daniel said. "Isn't it?" "Not even close." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "Then tell me what it's about." Daniel looked toward the river. His expression darkened. "There are people involved who operate far above county government." "Who?" "People who buy judges, governors, corporations, entire systems." Marcus studied him carefully. "And you're working for them?" Daniel laughed. It was not a happy sound. "No." He reached into his jacket. Marcus instantly shifted into a defensive stance. Daniel froze. "Relax." Slowly, he removed a thick flash drive. "Everything is here." Marcus stared at it. "What is it?" "Proof." "Proof of what?" Daniel's eyes hardened. "Proof that Sheriff Maddox was never the real target." The wind picked up around the bridge. Thunder rolled across the distant horizon. Daniel pressed the drive into Marcus's hand. When you open that file, everything changes. Why give it to me? For the first time, Daniel looked genuinely tired, because they found me. Marcus's stomach dropped. Who found you? Daniel glanced toward the woods, then his expression changed. Alarm, real alarm. Get down! A rifle shot exploded from the darkness. The bullet struck Daniel in the chest. Marcus lunged forward as Daniel collapsed onto the bridge. More gunfire erupted from the trees. The ambush had begun, and whoever ordered it wanted both men dead. Marcus hit the wooden planks of the bridge a fraction of a second before another bullet tore through the air above him. The night exploded into chaos. Gunfire echoed across the river valley. Splinters erupted from the bridge railing. The sound bounced between the trees, making it impossible to determine exactly how many shooters were involved. Daniel Cross lay several feet away. Blood spread across his shirt. Marcus crawled toward him. Daniel! Daniel grimaced through clenched teeth. Vest. Marcus immediately understood. The bullet had struck body armor. Painful, not fatal. A second volley of shots slammed into the bridge. Marcus dragged Daniel behind a large support beam. How many? He asked. Daniel listened carefully. Years of survival had sharpened his instincts. 4, maybe 5. Professionals? Daniel nodded. Definitely not local deputies. That answer worried Marcus more than the bullets, because if trained operators were involved, then the conspiracy reached far beyond Oak Ridge County. Another shot cracked through the darkness. A round struck inches from Marcus's shoulder. The shooters were closing in. Marcus pulled out his secure phone and activated an emergency signal. No words, no explanation, just a classified distress code. Federal response teams would receive it immediately. The question was whether help could arrive in time. Across town, Agent Rebecca Collins sat in a temporary command center reviewing documents when her laptop suddenly flashed red. Priority alert, emergency beacon activated. Marcus read. Collins jumped to her feet. Move! Within seconds, agents rushed toward waiting vehicles. The bridge location appeared on every screen. Something had gone terribly wrong. Back at the river, the attackers continued advancing. Marcus finally spotted movement among the trees, dark clothing, night optics, coordinated positioning. These were not random criminals. These were trained men following orders. Daniel stared into the darkness. They found the drive. What drive? The one I gave you. Marcus felt it inside his jacket. Whatever information the device contained was important enough to justify assassination. That alone revealed its value. What's on it? Marcus demanded. Daniel laughed bitterly. The thing everyone was too afraid to collect. Which is? Daniel looked directly at him. Names. Marcus felt a chill despite the summer heat. Names changed everything. Money trails could be explained away. Contracts could disappear. Witnesses could be intimidated. But names connected people. Names created accountability. Another burst of gunfire interrupted the conversation. One attacker emerged from the tree line. Marcus reacted instantly. Years of training took over. The man rushed forward. Marcus intercepted him. A brief struggle followed. Fast, violent, efficient. Within seconds, the attacker was unconscious. Marcus secured the weapon and moved back toward cover. Daniel shook his head. You haven't slowed down. Neither have you. A faint smile appeared on Daniel's face. It disappeared almost immediately. Headlights suddenly illuminated the distant road. Several black SUVs approached at high speed. Federal reinforcements. The attackers noticed them too. Their gunfire stopped. The woods fell silent. One by one, shadows disappeared into the darkness. The ambush was over. For now. 20 minutes later, Daniel sat inside an armored federal vehicle receiving medical attention. Agent Collins arrived looking furious. You went alone. Marcus said nothing. Again, still nothing. Daniel watched the exchange with amusement. You always were stubborn. You should be dead, Collins replied. A lot of people say that. Her patience evaporated. Enough games. Start talking. Daniel became serious. He looked at Marcus, then at the flash drive, then at Collins. The organization you're investigating isn't centered in Alabama. Where is it centered? Collins asked. Daniel hesitated. The hesitation alone was alarming. Finally, he answered. Washington. Silence filled the vehicle. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The implications were staggering. You're saying federal officials are involved? Collins asked. I'm saying some of the people funding this operation hold positions most Americans would never suspect. Marcus stared at him. How high does it go? Daniel's expression darkened. Higher than either of you are prepared for. The flash drive was immediately transported to a secure federal facility in Birmingham. Analysts worked through the night. Encryption layers began falling one by one. Files appeared. Bank records, emails, recorded conversations, financial transfers, photographs, hundreds of documents. Then, shortly after 3 o'clock a.m., one analyst opened a folder labeled Executive Contacts. The room became silent. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. A supervisor immediately called Agent Collins. Rebecca, you need to get here. What happened? The supervisor swallowed hard. The first name on the list belongs to a sitting United States Senator. Collins froze. But the supervisor wasn't finished. And that's not the biggest name in the file. For the first time since Operation Archangel began, the investigation stopped being a regional corruption case. It had just become a national crisis. By sunrise, the secure federal facility in Birmingham resembled a command center during a national emergency. Armed agents guarded every entrance. Cybersecurity teams worked without breaks. Senior officials arrived from Washington on government aircraft throughout the morning. Nobody wanted a paper trail. Nobody trusted ordinary communication channels. The information recovered from Daniel Cross's flash drive was too explosive. Marcus Reed stood beside Agent Rebecca Collins as analysts projected evidence onto a large screen. The room remained silent. Every person present understood the gravity of what they were seeing. The corruption network extended across multiple states. Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Illinois, Texas. Millions of dollars had moved through shell corporations disguised as infrastructure projects, charitable foundations, and development funds. The money funded political campaigns, purchased influence, silenced investigations, protected corrupt officials. And at the center sat an organization calling itself the Meridian Group. Officially, it did not exist. Unofficially, it controlled careers. How long? Marcus asked. An analyst looked up. At least 15 years. Collins shook her head. 15 years and nobody stopped them. The analyst pointed toward another screen. People tried. Several photographs appeared. Investigative journalists, auditors, former prosecutors, whistleblowers. Every one of them had lost jobs, careers, reputations, or opportunities shortly after getting close to the truth. The pattern was impossible to ignore. The organization did not eliminate opponents. It discredited them, destroyed credibility, made them invisible. Daniel Cross sat nearby under federal protection. His face looked older than ever. Years of hiding had left permanent marks. I spent 24 years collecting evidence, he said quietly. Why alone? Marcus asked. Daniel looked exhausted. Because everyone I trusted disappeared. The room grew quiet. Nobody questioned him. Nobody needed to. The files spoke for themselves. Several hours later, Attorney General William Harper arrived from Washington. His presence confirmed the seriousness of the situation. This was no longer a regional investigation. The Department of Justice had taken direct control. Harper reviewed the evidence personally. When he finished, he closed the folder and stared out the window. How many people know? Very few, Collins answered. Keep it that way. Marcus noticed the tension in the Attorney General's voice. Even powerful officials looked nervous now. The network's reach remained unknown. Trust had become a luxury. That afternoon, federal judges approved sealed warrants across multiple jurisdictions. Teams mobilized, targets were identified, arrest packages prepared, search warrants signed. The largest coordinated anti-corruption operation in modern American history quietly moved into position. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Washington, Senator Victor Langley sat inside his Capitol Hill office. The senior lawmaker enjoyed a reputation for integrity. Television appearances, award ceremonies, public service speeches. His image had been carefully constructed over decades. Then his private phone rang. Only a handful of people possessed the number. Langley answered immediately. Yes? The voice on the other end sounded panicked. They found Cross. Silence. The senator slowly stood. That's impossible. It happened. And the files? Compromised. For the first time in years, fear entered Langley's eyes. Real fear, the kind that money could not solve. The kind that influence could not control. Across the country, secure messages began moving between members of the Meridian Group. Phones activated, accounts emptied, documents destroyed, private aircraft prepared for departure. The organization understood exactly what was coming, and they were running. Back in Birmingham, Marcus received a private request from Attorney General Harper. The meeting lasted less than 10 minutes. When it ended, Marcus emerged looking troubled. Collins immediately noticed. What happened? Marcus hesitated. Harper wants me to testify publicly. That's good news. Not necessarily. Why? Marcus looked toward the busy operations center. Because once this becomes public, everyone involved will know exactly who exposed them. The reality settled heavily between them. Witness protection could provide security. It could not provide anonymity. Marcus had spent years avoiding attention. That life was ending. Late that night, analysts completed a full review of the flash drive. The final report exceeded 2,000 pages, dozens of criminal referrals, hundreds of supporting documents, enough evidence to launch investigations for years. The operation was ready. At 4:12 a.m., Attorney General Harper signed the authorization order. Operation Archangel entered its final phase. Simultaneously, tactical teams moved across 6 states. Federal agents approached homes, offices, courthouses, and corporate headquarters. Search warrants were executed. Arrests began. News organizations remained unaware. The public still slept. But before sunrise, one of the targets escaped. A private jet departed from a small airfield outside Atlanta. Flight records listed no destination. The passenger manifest contained a single name, Senator Victor Langley. And according to air traffic data, the aircraft had just disappeared from radar. The disappearance of Senator Victor Langley's aircraft transformed Operation Archangel overnight. What had begun as an anti-corruption investigation was now an international manhunt. Federal agencies across the country shifted into crisis mode. Intelligence analysts tracked financial transactions. Aviation experts reviewed flight data. Border authorities monitored private terminals. Every available resource focused on one objective: find Langley before he vanished completely. Inside a secure command center in Birmingham, giant screens displayed maps, flight paths, and intelligence reports. Marcus Reed stood beside Agent Rebecca Collins, watching information stream across the monitors. Nobody looked rested. Nobody looked comfortable. The stakes had become enormous. "Any updates?" Marcus asked. An analyst shook his head. "The transponder went dark 27 minutes after departure." "Can they do that?" "Legally, no. Technically, absolutely." Collins folded her arms. "He planned this." Marcus nodded. Langley had not panicked. He had prepared. That made him dangerous. Very dangerous. Meanwhile, news organizations finally learned something major was happening. By mid-morning, reporters flooded television networks with breaking updates: federal raids, political investigations, arrests, search warrants. The public watched in disbelief as familiar names appeared on screens nationwide. Judges, lobbyists, business executives, government officials. The story dominated every major network. For the first time, ordinary Americans began seeing the scope of the corruption. Questions multiplied. How long had it existed? Who knew? How many people were involved? No one had complete answers. Not yet. Back in Alabama, Sheriff Harold Maddox watched the news from a federal detention facility. His empire had collapsed. His allies were being arrested. His future had vanished. For years, he believed he was protected. For years, he believed powerful people would shield him. Now those same people were saving themselves. The realization was brutal. Across the hall, Roy Dalton sat alone in another holding cell. The former deputy no longer looked intimidating. The arrogance was gone. The confidence had evaporated. Only regret remained. Not regret for what he had done. Regret for getting caught. Several states away, Daniel Cross remained under heavy federal protection. Doctors had treated the injuries from the bridge attack. Physically, he would recover. Emotionally was another matter. 24 years of isolation had taken a toll. Marcus visited him late that afternoon. The room was quiet. For several moments, neither man spoke. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "You know what the worst part was?" Marcus looked at him. "What?" "Missing everything." Daniel stared out the window. Birthdays, weddings, funerals, life. Marcus understood. Service often carried hidden costs. Some were measured in years, others in relationships. "Was it worth it?" Marcus asked. Daniel considered the question carefully. Then he nodded. "Ask me again after this is over." That evening, a breakthrough arrived. Intelligence analysts discovered a financial transaction hidden among thousands of records. A fuel purchase, small, ordinary, easy to overlook, but it connected Langley's aircraft to a private airfield outside New Orleans. Within minutes, federal teams were mobilizing. Marcus and Collins boarded a government aircraft shortly before sunset. The flight south was tense. Neither expected Langley to surrender peacefully. The senator had spent decades accumulating power. People rarely abandoned that willingly. Several hours later, tactical teams surrounded a remote estate hidden among Louisiana wetlands. The property belonged to another shell corporation linked to the Meridian Group. Floodlights illuminated the darkness. Federal vehicles blocked every road. Agents moved into position. Marcus watched from a command vehicle. "Do we have confirmation?" he asked. Collins listened through her headset, then nodded. "He's inside." The operation began. Teams entered the estate. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. Radio traffic crackled constantly. Room cleared, building secure. Evidence located. No suspect. Collins frowned. "What do you mean, no suspect?" The response arrived immediately. "The residence is empty." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Again. Langley was ahead of them. But then another voice interrupted. "Hold on." The transmission sounded confused. "We found something in the basement." Agents descended beneath the estate. What they discovered stunned everyone. Rows of filing cabinets, encrypted servers, financial records, photographs, video archives, decades of evidence, an entire secret headquarters. But that wasn't the most shocking discovery. Inside a locked office, agents found a framed photograph hanging behind a desk. The picture showed 5 men standing together at a private gathering nearly 20 years earlier. One was Senator Langley. Another was Daniel Cross. The third was a much younger Sheriff Maddox. The fourth was Judge Bishop, and the fifth man made every investigator in the room freeze, because the final person in the photograph was Attorney General William Harper, the very man leading Operation Archangel. The photograph silenced the entire command center. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The image on the screen seemed impossible. Attorney General William Harper stood beside Senator Victor Langley, Sheriff Harold Maddox, Judge Leonard Bishop, and Daniel Cross. 5 men. 1 photograph, 1 secret. Marcus Reed stared at the image for several long seconds, then he looked at Daniel. The former soldier's face had gone pale. "When was it taken?" Marcus asked. An analyst zoomed in on the frame. A date became visible. 18 years earlier, long before Operation Archangel, long before the federal investigation, long before Daniel disappeared. Agent Rebecca Collins immediately ordered additional verification. The image was authentic. No manipulation, no alteration, no mistake. The Attorney General had been connected to the same network. The room erupted into activity. Phones rang, orders were issued, security protocols activated. For the first time, nobody knew who could be trusted. Marcus watched Harper through the glass wall of a nearby conference room. The Attorney General remained calm. Too calm. Minutes later, Collins entered the room carrying the photograph. She placed it on the table. "Explain this." Harper looked at the image. His expression never changed. "I wondered when you'd find it." Marcus exchanged a glance with Collins. That was not the response either expected. "You know these men?" Collins asked. I did. Were you part of the organization? Harper sighed. Then he nodded. The admission hit like a thunderclap. 20 years ago, Harper said quietly, I believed I could change the system from inside. Nobody interrupted. The Meridian Group recruited politicians, judges, military officers, and business leaders. They promised influence. They promised stability. They promised solutions. He looked down at the photograph. I was young enough to believe them. And then, Marcus asked, then I discovered what they really were. The room remained silent. Harper continued, by the time I understood, leaving wasn't possible. People who tried disappeared professionally. Some disappeared entirely. Daniel slowly stood. That's why I vanished. Harper nodded. You were the first person brave enough to fight back. For years, Daniel had believed he was alone. Now he learned he never was. The Attorney General opened a secure folder. Inside were documents nobody had ever seen. Evidence, years of evidence. Secret investigations, witness statements, financial records. Operation Archangel didn't begin 6 months ago, Harper said. It began 17 years ago. Marcus felt stunned. Everything suddenly made sense. The resources, the timing, the preparation, the extraordinary coordination. Someone had been building this case for nearly 2 decades. You were running the operation the entire time, Collins said. Harper nodded, very carefully. Why not act sooner? The Attorney General's expression hardened. Because if we moved too early, they would survive. I wanted the entire structure, not pieces of it. Hours later, federal agents located Senator Victor Langley attempting to cross into another country using false identification. His arrest ended the final chapter of the Meridian Group. Over the following months, investigations expanded nationwide. Dozens of convictions followed. Corrupt judges lost their positions. Politicians resigned. Executives faced criminal charges. The organization that once seemed untouchable collapsed under the weight of its own secrets. In Oak Ridge County, life slowly changed. A new sheriff's department was established. Independent oversight boards were created. Citizens who had once lived in fear found their voices. Linda Parker eventually became owner of the diner. The old building received renovations. Families returned. Tourists stopped without worry. The town began healing. One bright autumn afternoon, nearly a year after the first encounter, Marcus parked his truck outside the diner once again. The sky was clear. The air smelled of fallen leaves. Inside, laughter replaced tension. Hope replaced fear. Linda greeted him with a smile. Cherry pie, Marcus laughed. You already know the answer. He sat in the same booth where everything had started. For the first time in a very long time, he felt at peace. Daniel Cross eventually testified before Congress. Agent Rebecca Collins received national recognition. Attorney General Harper retired shortly after the investigation concluded, and Marcus finally made the trip to Chicago to visit his daughter. No headlines, no cameras, no speeches, just family. As the sun began setting beyond the highway, Marcus finished the last bite of cherry pie and looked out the window. The road stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Life was moving forward. Justice had not arrived quickly. It rarely did, but it arrived, and sometimes that was enough. The lesson was simple. Power without accountability eventually destroys itself. Truth may travel slowly. It may face obstacles. It may stand alone for years. But when enough courageous people refuse to look away, truth always finds its moment. Marcus smiled, left money on the table, and walked toward the door. Outside, the evening sky glowed gold above Alabama. The future remained uncertain. But for the first time in a generation, it belonged to honest people. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video.